It's not invincible.
I don't think anything's gonna help you, that's for sure.
Live.
Thank you. Good evening. It's Monday, March the 4th. This is a meeting of the Council Rock School District Board of School Directors Policy Committee. And we'll go around the table first of all and introduce ourselves. I'm chairing this evening, Board Member Ted Tate.
Yota Pali School Board.
Linda Stone School Board. Tracy Oseki School Board.
Nicole Khan School Board.
Ann Warner School Board.
Bob Hickey, School Board. Mike Clark, Solicitor for the District.
Tony Rapp, Director of Business Administration.
Andy Sanko, Superintendent.
Ron Spring, Director of Human Resources.
Matt Frederickson, Director of Information Technology.
Anthony Devlin, Director of Special Services.
Al Funk, Director of Secondary Education.
I'm Al, Coordinator of Safety and Security.
Thank you, everyone, for making time to be here. The agenda has us starting off with Policy 903. Mr. Clark, could you tell us what kind of changes we're looking at? And thank you, Mr. Frederickson, and why we're making these changes.
Sure. So the policy that you have in front of you is a model policy that is put forward from PSBA. The policy has been advanced by PSBA following a lawsuit in Pennsbury a few years ago. PSBA has advanced the policy. Doesn't completely follow along the lines of the court case from a few years ago in Pennsbury, but it does kind of address some of the issues. The model policy that PSBA has put out gives boards, if they choose to follow it, the opportunity to pick various options in the policy, what they would want and what they wouldn't want. We have made certain recommendations regarding what we think is appropriate and in the best interest of the district to have in the policy. And I think that, Matt, is that what we have up in front of us?
Yes, sir.
Our red line version?
What you're looking at is the old policy has the strike through it. The new policy language is highlighted in a horrible looking yellow. There were some sections that were completely changed based on the new policy from PSBA. And this is not uncommon when they release a policy after several years for there to be major changes to it.
So that's what you have in front of you. It's not dramatically different from your current policy, but it does make a couple of changes. And again, PSBA has given certain options. One of the things I think that's interesting about this policy that PSBA has put in, and I'm glad to see that they're not frightened off by some recent court decisions. They do leave in significant amounts of the language regarding when you can interrupt the speaker and when you can prevent them from speaking. There is a lot of language in here regarding profanity and personal attacks and things along those lines, which have been left in the model policy from PSBA. So.
Thank you. Let's see. One change I recall is that no speaker may cede their time to another speaker.
Correct.
We're keeping in place some current limitations, such as 3 minutes per person, 30 minutes per comment session, and the comment sessions being the first at the outset of the meeting confined to agenda items, and the second being sort of an open forum at the end of the meeting. Questions, anyone, comments?
I will, if I can, sorry to interrupt Mr. Tate, but one of the things that we are suggesting a change is in the sign-in request form. PSBA had some language about completing almost like a document about what you're going to talk about and things along those lines. We're not suggesting that you follow that, but PSBA basically wanted to name and municipality. We're suggesting that it be name, address, and municipality, although when the person comes to the podium, they really only have to announce their name and if they want to announce their municipality. The reason we're making that suggestion is I think we had an incident at our last meeting where somebody came to the podium, gave a name, then said what municipality he lived in, but it's uncertain as to whether or not that person was actually a Council Rock resident. So if somebody's putting down an address, it's not going to allow us to, in that moment, determine whether or not they're actually a resident of the district, but it will allow us for future meetings to be aware that somebody may or may not be a resident of the district, and if they're not a resident of the district, based on this policy, you would not allow them to speak.
Ms. Stone?
Hi, the only, question that I had, or that I thought we should be more clear on, is under that section where it says authority. I know what is intended, that it says, an opportunity for district residents, taxpayers, employees, and students. And I know what the intent is there, but I know somebody could read it and say, it's only residents that have to be of the district, taxpayers or employees or students don't need to be in the district. But someone could read it that way?
Correct, and I think that's the way it's supposed to be read. You should make an opportunity for residents to speak, all residents. And even if you're not a resident, if you are a taxpayer in the district.
Yes, I'm saying it's not
Oh,
clear that it's a district taxpayer or
Right,
a
okay.
district employee.
sure, we can.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. We can add language, district residents and taxpayers in the district. We could add that language.
And district employees and district students.
Yeah, unless it read residents, taxpayers, employees, all from the Council Rock district.
Right.
However,
I can actually make that change right now.
Ms. Khan?
I guess just going off of what Ms. Stone had recommended, trying to make this as seamless and, clear to our constituents. Is it possible, potentially, Mr. Clark, to write in permanent and current resident? Just because I know there have been situations in other districts where there weren't necessarily permanent tax-paying residents of that school district, or current school.
So I think current and permanent are different things.
Right.
And
So I'm
I
asking
think,
about both.
right, and I think that there is a distinction between somebody, if you're declaring somewhere in the Council Rock School District as your residence, even if it's, for a 6-month period of time, you've been transferred into some local business and you're going to be living only here for 6 months. If this is your residence during that period of time, then presumably you should be allowed to speak. But I understand what you're saying about current and former and things along those lines. And that distinction, we could wordsmith that a little bit to make that distinction, so.
Anybody object to current? No. Mr. Hickey?
Oh, you're asking a question?
Yeah.
About current. So why are we limiting public speaking? What is, if someone has a child in our school district, do they not have a right to speak because they moved out because of divorce or something like that? Are you trying to stop somebody that, what's the difference with somebody current or previous? Like, what are we trying to achieve with that? Ms. Clark?
Are you asking me?
Yes, because you're the one that brought it up. So what are we trying to get here with the current? No, actually, I asked Ms. Khan, so I hope
Well,
she can speak for herself.
I have no problem speaking for myself, but I know I'm not chairing this meeting, so I want to be respectful of the chair of this meeting.
Chairs don't have to answer the questions for you.
I also don't have to answer the questions for you.
Okay,
either,
well then you don't
Mr.
have to answer the question. So
Well,
my
it
point
is-
would be,
It is a good point by Mr. Hidalgo, and it is probably a miss on our part. Normally, there is no restriction on parents of current students speaking at a meeting. And Mr. Hidalgo raises a good point. If there is a separation, or even if there's never been a marriage, and the one parent lives outside the district and the other parent and the child lives in, there normally has never been that sort of restriction. So again, that's probably a miss on our part that needs to be cleaned up and put in there, that parents of current students have the right to speak, so.
Okay. Ms. Khan?
Just to clarify, and I guess addressing your question to me, Mr. Hidalgo, I have no problems, and thank you, Mr. Clark, for clarifying that. But obviously, if you have a child that's a current student in our district, you, that parent, have legal and custodial rights, they should have that opportunity. So I don't have any disagreement.
Yeah, and I, again, as I said, it might not have been in the PSBA policy, but in everywhere we've ever been, there's always been the opportunity for parents of current students to speak. When your student graduates and you're no longer a resident, you lose that right, but during that time, your child is a student, you should be permitted to speak.
Correct. Thank you.
Yeah, I assume this is going to go through the process of a first read and second read.
Yeah, we only make exceptions to first and second read when it's really routine. So this one certainly would require first.
Yeah, I have a few questions / concerns about either the current and or proposed policy. So if we just scroll down a little bit here.
What in particular?
First of all, I read on, I'm not sure of limiting, and it might be the current policy of limiting public comment to 30 minutes. I'm not sure of the purpose of such. Sometimes an issue might come up that warrants much more consideration than the ability of 10 people to speak for 3 minutes. I'm not sure why we're limiting that. Is it a matter of just trying to cut down on time and what time we?
It's past practice. If you want to change it, feel free.
Okay, good, okay, I'll change it then, no. But I'm just saying, maybe something that we can discuss. The other one is about seating your time. Some people are not very comfortable standing in front of a microphone. I know I'm not very comfortable standing in front when I spoke in front. And, they want to either A, have someone make a point for them, or B, someone may have a very valid point. But to make that point, it might take longer than 3 minutes. I agree with the idea of not being able to come back a second time and speak to the same subject. But if somebody, a resident, wants to cede their time to another resident about a particular topic, why wouldn't they be able to? Generally, what I've seen on my time on the board is, it might be one person, so a person may talk for 6 minutes as opposed to 3. I've never seen anybody up there for 12 or 15 minutes, pontificating on a particular subject. There's another one or two, what's that?
you want to tackle them one at a time?
He said he had more.
No, I think those two are good for now.
Okay. Ms. Dunn.
Is there some place in here that says that if there's more speakers than the time allots, it can be put to the next meeting?
Well,
Was there something like that?
I believe it was.
yeah, but the next meeting is the next meeting, not the meeting at hand. And what happens is, as time goes on, people become less open, or they may not show. As witnessed with a lot of the different subjects that have come up, you get a big crowd the first night, and then the second time the subject's on the agenda, not as many, and then the third time, you have your usual cohort of people in the audience. I,
Do you have a suggestion?
yeah, limited. I give people the opportunity to speak. You know, if it's a particular subject and it takes 3 hours, it takes 3 hours, whether it's before and or after the meeting.
Mr. Dago?
Yeah, so just with past practice, I think I talked to Ed about this too. If it was always 30 minutes, that's just a policy, but it's always been at the discretion to never turn down somebody from speaking. So it might be in the policy 30 minutes, but we've never cut people off. Because if you plan it correctly and there's a divided subject, you could literally just have the first people come whoever earliest, that group gets to do it. So I would say it's probably up to the presiding officer at the time, whoever was the president or overseeing the meeting, to make that judgment. But you can say 30 minutes. I'll sit at that dais every day and say, never turn anybody away from speaking.
Ms. Pelly?
So I remember in the beginning when I joined the board, and Bob, you may remember that too, it was like still COVID and there were so many people. And actually even before I joined the board, I came to make public comment and it was a random, like some randomly were speakers. And even if you came prepared to speak, you may not be, your name may not be drawn. And I think that was because in the past, this was taking so long and it was becoming, because everybody was talking about the same issue about COVID and they had different opinions. So I don't know if that was the time that this was instituted, but it was pretty strict. The 3 minutes were very strict. I remember Ed had to cut me off during my comment, and also I wasn't sure, and other people were not sure if we're going to be selected to speak. And I was okay with that, because you have to respect that the board is there to do its business. So the public has the right to speak, but you have to try to manage the time. And also, I really think that you don't need 6 or 12 minutes to make your comment. People can write in a way that within like 90 seconds, you can really make your comment and respect, the time of everybody else. So I am not sure when the 30-minute limit was instituted, but I experienced it when I was coming for public comment before I was elected. And the truth is we don't really watch, right? We don't have something to say, oh, it's 30 minutes, we stop it. Mm-hmm. But we try to, I think it's nice to have that option in case there is abuse from.
I should have pointed out at the outset that the changes that we're proposing that were recommended by PSBA really are not adding any additional restriction, contrary to what we've done in past practice. The 30 minutes limit goes back as far as I can remember, 8 years or more. Mr. Clark, if we were in a meeting and we had the first public comments session of 30 minutes and there was a line of people waiting to speak, a board member could move to extend the public comment period and we could extend it.
You could, and back to Ms. Stone's question for a second, it's in the Sunshine Act that says you can defer public comment to the next meeting or a special meeting if there's not enough time. And you can do what you're talking about, Mr. Tate, but the thing that we want to caution you about is that whenever you begin to get away from the clear regulations, there becomes an issue of whether or not you are going to be cutting certain things off based on content. And you can't be basing it on content. And I'm looking at this tapestry behind it, and let's say Churchville decided they wanted to change their name to the Tornadoes, and 50 people were out, and the first 40 were pro changing the name to Tornadoes. And then the presiding officer said, well, we're going to cut it off here because we've been going at this for an hour and 20 minutes. the 10 people who are online who were pro leaving at Cyclones can say, well, it was being cut off because content. You were cutting me off because I had a particular viewpoint or I had a particular opinion I wanted to express. That's why we think in some of these situations, I think PSBA is sort of in agreement with this. When you set a bright line and you adhere to it, you have run less of a risk of being accused of making your decisions based on content or not treating everyone equally. But you can do what you want.
No,
You've got to be careful.
Makes sense, thank you. There's a second.
Just a question about that, and to Joe's point also, like, is there a way to randomize? Like, so I think it's valid to say we don't want the first 30 people to all express the same viewpoint. If there's different viewpoints to be heard, I want to hear from all of the residents. So is there a way that we can randomize it? Like Yoda was talking about pulling names out of a hat or, you know, whatever. Is there a way that we can do that? Is that legal?
I've seen it happen a couple of different places in my career where public comment is more just sort of like on random strips of paper, like you fill out what you want to talk about and you leave it and the board members just kind of pull it out. Most everyone has a sign-in sheet like you do. Again, I guess you could randomize it, but if you're going to leave it up to someone's discretion to say who they're picking and they go 1, 3, 9, 4, 2, somebody's going to say, well, you skipped over me intentionally. And then you may end up with problems with that. So again, it's why, liking a bright line it presents less opportunity for arguments that someone's being mistreated or there's favoritism.
Ms. Scott?
I guess having been to multiple board meetings and committee meetings over the last several years, and having spoken at both committee meetings and board meetings, personally, I think 3 minutes is ample time to get your point across, your message across to the board or constituents or whomever is watching or listening at home. I have also been part of that group where Ms. Polly was referring to about this randomized, you would go in, there would be 50 people signed up at one point, and when you get there, you sign up. And I know at several points, there were times where the secretary was able to randomly pick, like she would pick not necessarily from the beginning of the list, but she would start maybe at the end of the list and alternate. So there was some randomized process at some point. I think we also have to keep in mind, just because there's less community members showing up to a meeting, that doesn't mean that we're going to give them open time, unlimited time, and no boundaries to just speak on whatever topic matter they want to choose for unprecedented amount of time. I mean, I think we have to be respectful of everyone's time, not only the board members, the cabinet administrators, the people at home, our constituents, the board members themselves, because we're there to get business done, right? Business for the district, for the students, and I don't understand why giving this open, like just free for all of whoever shows can speak about the topic matter or non-agenda items for unlimited time. I think there has to be some sort of guidelines, like most things in life. Thank you.
And again, just two other things. Remember, this policy is not going to be etched in stone. So if you find that over the next year or so, there are 20 people who don't get to speak at every meeting, then you can always go back and sort of revisit the timeline issue. And the other is, again, the court case that PSBA references out of Pennsbury, the judge there, even though it has no precedential value, the judge there said, time limits are appropriate and lawful. But it's within your discretion.
Mr. Doug. Matt Frederickson, can you please go to the part of the slide that speaks of the 30-minute limit?
I will do my best to find you.
Right there.
It's right there.
So is that in our current policy?
I believe so.
So it's highlighted as a change, but it's in our current policy.
It's highlighted as a change because the wording is slightly different.
what's the difference? The public comment session begins at the meeting shall be limited to not more than 30 minutes. What does the current policy say?
I do not have
I'm
that
looking-
in front of me.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm not sure we got this. Was this what was sent in the email? Because when I looked at it on my phone, it didn't.
It wasn't
show up
highlighted
that.
like this, Mr. Hidalgo. I did this over the weekend and this morning
Thank
to
you.
make sure that the changes that were in here reflected the changes that are being proposed
Right.
in total.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, having these red lines over the weekend would have been helpful. I'm kind of at a disadvantage tonight.
In the future, they'll be off this week.
But, thank you so much for putting this together. I wanted to, just for you to briefly describe
Do you want me to jump?
the changes that PSBA made,
I've got it.
and probably made some amendments to that. You didn't just go with the policy, so I was wondering if you could review what input you had into the changes that aren't reflected on the PSBA.
Sure. We added, we recommended striking that the presiding officer may expand the opportunity to provide public comment to others when deemed necessary to inform the board. That was in the section that allows for residents, taxpayers, employees, and students. We recommended that that portion be stricken. Again, well, two reasons. One is going back to the issue is we think it's problematic when you allow the presiding officer to determine who they're going to allow to speak and who they're not going to allow to speak. And also, we're just not sure what the point of allowing non-residents, non-taxpayers, your point about parents aside, but non-residents, non-taxpayers, non-students, non-employees to speak during public comment. We think that becomes a recipe for disaster. You're essentially inviting outside agitators to come in and cause problems at your meetings.
Okay, so I'm trying to digest this. Yeah, I'm doing this on the fly.
Mr. Hidalgo,
Let me, we were just double checking the current policy, and there is no 30-minute limit in the current policy.
Oh, see, for some reason I thought there was, so, yeah, I probably.
We've been operating
Under the assumption.
under the assumption, or that's been the practice.
Right,
But it is not written in the current policy.
see, so
3
I,
minutes, that's what.
the 3 minutes, right, no, but the
Right.
30 minutes, I definitely don't want to tie the hands and get into a practice of cutting public comment, because getting back to all the situations you guys were talking about where it was a long night of public comment. But from us, from a standpoint of a board, we thought is this what we're deciding here? We're either going to stifle public comment by limiting it to 30 minutes, or we're just going to continue to do what we've done before, which is allow everybody the opportunity to speak within reason. Because I think we did probably cut off at an hour or 2 hours and then put it to the end of the meeting. But I think we run the risk. I mean, you're saying that's PSBA says 30-minute public comment? Is that a recommendation?
I believe in their sample policy, they give you the option of saying either 30 minutes or an hour.
All right, so I would lean towards the hour if I were you guys. I mean, my own particular situation, my thoughts here. And I still have to go over that one that you think about some of this stuff that you talked about striking. I think in general, we're doing pretty good, but 30 minutes it's going to be difficult if there's another contentious subject that comes up. So I would prefer, if they're giving us the option of 30 minutes or an hour, and that's PSBA, I would rather go with an hour.
Yeah, I think what PSBA says, 30 minutes, an hour, or other.
Or other,
Yeah.
okay, so really, I mean,
Yeah.
be careful about what we do about, limiting speech, and then as far as, just to say, okay, so that's not part of I'm trying to think about, we've never gotten in trouble with public comment before, right? From a legal standpoint.
No, not from a legal
So now we're
standpoint.
talking about, people are not gonna be happy with 30 minutes if they don't get to speak.
Well, Ms. Secretary.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, so there's 2 periods for public comment, so do they have to be the same?
They do
You know,
not.
so in theory, we could say like, okay, we're gonna give you an hour to talk about agenda items, or vice versa, I don't know which is better, but they don't, I just want to know, do they have to be the same?
So they do not have to be the same, and PSBA says their sort of menu of what you can choose from says 30 minutes, an hour or other for the first public comment period, which is on agenda items. And then for the second, it says 30 minutes or other. I think there's a recognition by PSBA there that non-agenda items wouldn't necessarily, take up as much time as potentially agenda items would.
Well, sometimes it's the opposite.
Ms. Pally?
So the 30 minutes is the guideline from the PSBA.
No, they say 30 minutes, an hour or other. They're letting you choose what you want to do.
Right, so in the old policy, it was something about the visitor who may wish to distribute materials to the board, but I did not see, there was a process of, submitting, but I don't see anything in the new draft about that. Maybe I missed it. So it used to say, a visitor who may wish to distribute materials to the board shall furnish those materials to the designated representative of the board, to include the Director of Business Affairs or Director of Secondary Education. So, because we had a case where someone wanted to give like a handout to the board, that I remember in that case they did not give this in advance, but we let them distribute. Is it up to the discretion of the board if somebody wants to do that? Because it's not in the new draft.
So if somebody wants to hand you something, I think you don't normally see restrictions on that in a public comment policy. You may want to accept something.
Okay.
I think what certain boards try to do is not necessarily have somebody just kind of wandering around handing out documents to all 9 board members. Handing it to someone else who ends up distributing it. But we don't really think that needs to go into a policy. That's more sort of just the protocol of how you're running your meetings. If somebody wants to hand something up and you want to accept it, you can accept it.
And also, in the old one, it says no placards or banners will be permitted within the meeting room, but it's not in the new. Is it like according to PSBA's guidelines?
Well, it's partially according to PSBA. It's also partially because a school board meeting room is a limited public forum, but it's still a public forum. And we think you need to be very cautious, and I think a lot of people think you need to be very cautious on preventing anyone from, holding up a sign if they want to. Obviously, you have the decorum of your meeting. If someone's holding up a giant sign and people behind them can't see, we have the right to maintain decorum in the meeting room. But we think and when I say we, I shouldn't just say our firm, but a lot of attorneys feel like this is a little bit of a problematic area, and it's one where you probably want to be very careful if you're going to limit people from holding up a sign, because a sign is speech. It's why you have to leave up all those signs on people's front yards all year round that you're all tired of looking at, because a sign is speech. So if somebody wants to come to the podium to make a point, or if they want to hold up a sign that says Churchville Tornadoes, they should be permitted to do so, as long as it's not interfering with the operation of the meeting. And the other thing we always worry about too, when you start eliminating signs, is what happens if people are walking in with T-shirts or things along those lines. It just gets to be a little bit of a problem.
Ms. Stone?
Because we have 2 public comment periods, can anyone who does not get to speak in the first 30 minutes, can they then be assigned for speaking at the end of the meeting in the second public comment?
If you chose to do it that way, you could. The Sunshine Act recognizes that if there isn't enough time for public comment, that you can defer it to a different portion of the meeting or to a subsequent meeting or to a special meeting. I think the issue that's being discussed here, though, is the first public comment normally relates to agenda, not normally, it relates to agenda items, and that there may be some concern that people want to be heard on the agenda item before you vote. But yes, you can.
Ms. Khan?
Just to clarify off the change that we're gonna have with the signs, let's say, or banners or whatever that potentially could come into a boardroom. Would the signs then follow the same guidelines under the new revised policy where the individual's public comment may not be interrupted or terminated, but not limited to the following, where it's talking about whether it's intimidation, harassment, confidential information, profanity, threats? Would that also follow? I would imagine, I'm just assuming that, but I just wanted to
Yes.
say
Yes.
it there. Okay, thank you.
You can't hold up a sign using profanity. You can't hold up a sign listing some information regarding a student. You can't hold up a sign that is, racial, ethnic, or slurs or things along those lines.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lagos?
Sure, so was there any other deviations besides the last one? You said we were in the middle of that.
Sure, so, I wouldn't say deviations, it was our recommendation because, PSBA, as I said, kind of gave you a little buffet here from time to time. They said you can have individuals wishing to comment during the board meeting shall complete a document designed for requests to comment and submit the document to the board secretary prior to the meeting. We're not recommending that. We're saying just a sign-in sheet that gives your name, your address, your municipality, and the topic to be addressed.
Okay.
That's all that we're recommending, and that's all that the Sunshine Act requires with regards to the minutes, so.
Good change.
Mr. Hicks?
Also, I saw something about the recording not being the official document, and we would dispose of public comment records after our typical policy for this. Is that part of this one?
No, I think what that normally comes down to is I don't know how long we're maintaining the video recordings of the board meetings.
It's on YouTube, so it's indefinite.
Yeah.
When they start,
It's forever.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
I thought I read something in the policy.
if your board secretary uses a cassette tape, to record the minutes, record the meeting to aid her in transcribing the minutes, creating the minutes. It's the minutes of the meeting that are the official minutes, not the tape.
That was it.
And what most board secretaries do is the minute you adopt your minutes, they erase that tape.
Okay, but we're not getting rid of YouTube.
No, I don't think we're getting rid of YouTube.
I mean, at any certain time.
No.
There's no policy removing it. Don't look like you don't know it. Yeah, you were not here. All right, so I still have to do a little homework, but we're gonna make 2 reads over the next 2 board
First
meetings.
read,
So
second read.
good start.
2
Thank you
months.
for me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Hickey?
I know there's a third item. You did touch on it briefly, but I'm not really sure I understand. Why do we need the address of someone who speaks?
So I think we were confronted with it last meeting. I don't believe, and I will defer to other people who encountered this individual. The individual who showed up with the mask and the gloves and there was some question as to whether or not he's actually a Council Rock resident. If you give an address, you're not going to announce the address, and they don't have to say the address. And we would even suggest that you eliminate having somebody say what municipality they're from, unless it's like completely germane to the point that they're trying to make. You know, I live in Northampton, and I want to talk about, you know, one of the schools that's in Northampton. But we would recommend they just come up, and if it's on the sign-in sheet, which is in front of the presiding officer, they just say, my name's Mike Clark, and I want to talk about this topic. But the reason we're asking for addresses is, or we think it's a good idea to ask for addresses, is to confirm whether or not someone actually lives in the district, if there becomes some question about it.
On the minutes, though, the municipality will still be listed.
If you want to continue, you can continue to have them announce it, or, I believe after.
Sign-in sheet usually goes to the secretary.
Sign-in sheet goes to the secretary.
So we would, it's not, so there's no policy on putting their municipality
No.
in the minutes?
No.
We just done that?
No.
And their address would be not.
Should not go into the minutes.
Not the public.
Nope.
Well, we have in the proposed policy, 30-minute time limit on both the first and second public comment periods. I personally favor a 30-minute limit on the first public comment period. I could be persuaded that we could make the second public comment period limitless. We need to know the will of the board. I think we know your opinion, Mr. Hidalgo.
All right, I'll just reiterate it if you need me.
What do we want to do here? Ms. Stone?
Well, I also understand that individuals also have the ability to send emails and contact us in, other fashion besides coming to the board meeting. So I think it is important to keep some very specific limits on public comment, especially when our meetings are going 2 hours. As Nikki says, respectful to all the people that are trying to listen. And the public that are at the meetings as well.
Ms. Horner?
I'd like to see 30 minutes on the agenda, so that I think that would give us enough time. And Ms. Stoney brought up the fact that we talked about if we need more time, pushing them to maybe to the end, but we cannot limit anybody. And I think we need to make sure that we always allow everybody to speak at the meeting.
So 30 minutes and then unlimited?
Yep.
Holly?
So, the first public comment is on agenda items. So someone wants to express their opinion about something that we will deliberate and possibly vote. So if they get to speak on this at the end of the meeting, we have already voted about it. So I don't see a point of making the second part unlimited because, and then if if the second part is a non-agenda item, again, it means that they have other means of contacting the board. Of course, we can always, according to the policy, have a special meeting where people can come and speak, or push them to the second, like the next one. So my preference would be to keep the 30 minutes limit. And of course, we have never really, unless during COVID that they were like timing everything, we've never had the opportunity, we never told somebody you can't speak. But it's nice to have that option in the policy in case we need to do that. I would prefer to keep it at the 30 minutes and 3 minutes limit per speaker.
So, and one other thing about this policy that I think is important to note is you can only speak once. So what we've seen in the past at times is you allow people to speak multiple times, then people just keep getting up and getting up and getting up. So if you do 30 minutes, but you're going to allow to go past that 30 minutes, the only thing we would caution is then everybody who wants to speak, speaks. you can't do 39 minutes or 42 minutes and then say, then we're done. Because then you run the risk of making restrictions based on, like, I saw that guy and I don't like that guy, so that's why I'm cutting it off before he gets up and speaks. So, even though you've never seen him before, that's what he'll say, you're trying to prevent me because.
So, I mean, this is like, I'm trying to think of like situations that have happened where, so someone can make a comment and then somebody can come back and try to respond to that, but don't we say that at least the board does not have to respond, right? But we have the option if we want to respond. And if we do respond, we can, whatever, if we have a 30-minute limit, we can take that time off the 30 minutes, correct?
Correct. And again, just from, seeing various things that happen is, what does happen from time to time is if you're responding while public comment is still going on, then the person who you've responded to, they want to make a rush to the podium and they want to start responding to your response. That's why we normally suggest that if you want to respond, it's best done after public comment is concluded and not to sort of get into a back and forth with the speaker, because again, it begins to blur how much time are you using up, how much time are they using up. And it also, it just can prolong it.
So also, from, again, just before I joined the board, when I was coming for public comment, one thing that I remember was that you had to get here before the beginning of the meeting and you had to sign your name if you want to make a public comment. And then the thing was gone, and if you came late, too bad, you missed your opportunity. But I have seen in like other meetings where someone can say, I didn't have a chance to put my name on, but I would like to speak. I mean, what do we do in cases
We permit
like
that now.
But it's not in our policy, right?
So, I don't, the inability for someone to sign into public comment before the public comment period is over should not prevent them from making public comment. I don't know, and again, I've only been at 2 meetings, so I can't say, do we collect the sheet before the meeting even begins? Yeah.
So we usually collect the sheet before the meeting begins, and then at the end of public comment, if there's more time left, we usually ask, does anyone else want to speak?
Yeah, and if you do that, you're fine. I think if some places that I represent, the manager will walk to the back of the room right as public comment is about to begin and grab the sign-in sheet. So presumably, anyone who's there at that point in time. But as Matt is saying, if you're allowing people to speak, even if they haven't signed in, that's fine,
So in that case, we should have a separate sheet where people will have to write their address.
Well, that's the one point that I think makes sense. If you're going to do that, then perhaps at the podium itself could be a sign-in sheet, and as the person comes up to make public comment who just raised their hand, they could put down their name and their address and their municipality. But I don't think that really needs to be in the policy. I think that's more just sort of the way you're gonna operate the meeting and make it a little bit more accessible for people.
Okay. Mr. Lara?
Thank you, appreciate that. So, Ms. Khan and Ms. Polly, you guys came to public comment many times. If you didn't speak in the first 30 minutes under your policy you're proposing, you wouldn't have been able to speak before we voted on something. So what I'm saying is, I think PSBA, we don't have a policy for limiting public comment. I don't think we have any issue, even as I went through redistricting, I went through the pandemic, and people just got to speak. And it's not, if we were there late, that's okay. It never went too crazy. But under your own policy, you would not have been
You
able
were
to.
allowed to speak. There were times that
I wish that
you were
did.
randomly selected.
I'm sorry, can you just wait to be addressed by the chair?
Sorry, but you
That's
I had to
okay.
respond to you.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You have
So-
a short memory, maybe.
So here, okay, so now you're gonna attack me. Say that again? What did you
Don't
say?
remember that you are leaving?
No, what did you say? I have a what?
Yeah, you don't remember.
I have a short memory?
Yeah, you don't remember that, you're limiting public comment.
That's very collegial. So, another thing to be ashamed of. So,
Watch the way you speak.
well, I think you should watch the way you're speaking
Let's,
to me.
let's all
No, no,
take.
no, hold on a second.
No, I'm chairing.
Yeah, okay, well, she interrupted me when I was speaking.
Joe, let's just take a deep breath,
Okay, I'm gonna get back on point.
everybody.
The point is this, there is no limit on public comment right now, and I think you'll probably end up being challenged at some point if you do start to limit public comment. That's just my premonition. So I would say that's one thing we can stop doing, is trying to stifle free speech. And that's all I've heard from you guys tonight.
Okay, we're gonna go another 5 minutes. Ms. Khan, Ms. Osicki.
I just want to say, I didn't even speak to the 30-minute aspect yet, so I don't know how I can be brought up in the conversation. I haven't made any of my thoughts personal, or I only spoke about an experience I had. I did not make any recommendations at this point.
Good.
So I just want that on the record.
Yeah, Joe, I am not opposed to free speech, nor am I trying to stifle free speech. I like free speech. I really enjoy public comment. And what I was going to say, and I like hearing what people have to say. What I was going to say though was, to me, and I'm happy to be corrected, maybe I'm missing something, but to me, if we're gonna make one period 30 minutes and one period an hour, it seems to me that the things that we are going to be voting on should certainly be heard before we vote. So I would, if we're gonna limit it at all, I would propose switching it and letting agenda items, be the longer period.
Well, we don't have a consensus. So I'm going to suggest that we move this policy forward as proposed for first read with 2 30-minute limits. And we will discuss it at the next monthly board meeting when it comes up for first read. And we'll discuss it again when it comes up for second read and vote on it.
So, Mr. Clark, are you right now going to be making any change to the policy based on what you've heard this evening?
Yes, we'll make some corrections, we'll circulate it to everyone on this side of the table, make sure all of our memories jive, and then one of us can
I'll
distribute it to the board.
just.
Yep.
Okay, so the plan is you'd like us to have this on the agenda for first read for the March board meeting?
Correct.
Okay.
I had a question. I think that it's very important that we have, that we limit who may make public comment. And I would not like to see that part of the policy wait 3 months. Is there a way of maybe making that change to the policy and approving it without the time limits? And then then we can still continue to talk about the time limits. Because otherwise we're leaving the policy as is, which means there's still no time limit. Is that correct? Because it's in there, there's no time limit on. But at least to have the policy change to limit who speaks.
Can I just ask for clarification, because the current policy says, the board requires that public participants be residents or taxpayers of this district, anyone representing a group in the community or school district, any representative of a firm eligible to bid on materials or services solicited by the board, any district employee, or any district student. That's the current policy.
So currently,
We do limit speech.
That's not
we
changing.
just haven't been,
Well, the address thing is new.
That would be a new change.
So you do not permit anyone and everyone to speak?
except
The
that.
way your current policy is written. And Tony just pointed out that your current policy says the time period shall be limited. It doesn't say what the time limit is. But it does indicate that there will be a limit.
And
So right now you say,
3 minutes is in there?
the
Yes.
board requires that public participants be residents or taxpayers, Any representative of a firm eligible to bid on material services solicited any district employee or district student or anyone represented a group in the community or school district, so.
Do we have to say that they have to include their address and are present?
No.
No, not yet.
Mr. Zago, last comment.
Thank you. Well, this is fine, we'll save it for the next meeting, but the thing is I like the current policy. We set, and that's what makes sense. You know, we can set a limit, but really depending on the subject, the president will decide 30 minutes, 60 minutes, and at the end, he may even just say go over. I think to set ourselves up for a concrete number is not the way to go, but to say the current policy is there. Like, if we go to redistricting, we are not going to limit public comment to 30 minutes. And if we have a redistricting forum, are we gonna limit the public comment to 30 minutes? Like, let's just leave the policy the way it is and stop trying to, you know, limit it to the 30 minutes because PSBA said 30, an hour, or whatever. Let's just keep it the way it is, which is, there'll be a limit, but that's at the discretion of, I guess, the presiding officer.
And we're gonna recommend that against that discretion of the presiding officer. It creates a slippery slope when you leave it to one individual to say when they're gonna cut it off and when they're not gonna cut it off. And I think that is a bit of a problem.
So how do we curtail that? Because
Well, I think we're gonna
work
discuss.
on it.
It's gonna be, this policy is gonna be on the agenda at the March board business meeting, and it's gonna be on the agenda at the April board business meeting. So we have 2 more opportunities to discuss it. Are we okay to move on? Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Policy 103, Edward.
So I'm going to talk about policies 103.1, policy 248, and policy 249 together, because they really are consistent and the changes, and you'll see there's not major changes. The changes are really just to build consistency among those 3 policies and to clarify wording. So we have policy 103, which deals with Title IX, sexual harassment, discrimination, and that's based on a federal statute. We then have 3 other policies that deal with harassment and bullying of some type, 103.1, which deals with qualified students with disabilities. Then there's a 248, which is unlawful harassment, and 249, which is bullying and cyberbullying. There's a lot of overlap, particularly between 248 and 249. But for some reason, each one has its own nuances with respect to investigations. So, and that created some, confusion for administration, for parents. So really looking at it, talking with Mr. Funk, who, oversees secondary, but also was in the position as principal. It's just a way to really just create clarity and consistency among policies. So there's nothing really substantive other than trying to make sure that the investigative processes are the same. Rather than, I believe 249 said we investigated as Title IX, policy 103. 248, which is very similar to 249, says we're going to investigate it based on the form provided to the principal. So again, it's really just taking these 3 policies, making sure that the wording's clarified and consistent with respect to the investigative processes.
Thank you. Questions?
I guess in the revised policy for 249, the bullying and cyberbullying, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the changes, I think it's on the last page of the revised, if Mr. Frederickson is able to pull it out.
Guidelines?
Yes, under guidelines, I think it's the 2nd paragraph. So it says the policy shall be accessible in every classroom. Policy shall be posted in a prominent location within each school building and on the district website. The district may develop and implement bullying prevention and intervention programs. Such programs provide district staff and students with appropriate training for effective responding to, et cetera, as we see on there. So this is a change stating that we don't currently have any programs, or we're implementing a program or
Is it the
possibility?
middle paragraph?
Yeah,
there?
let's see, it's different.
Trying to find.
I was following along,
Oh, sorry.
because, right? Yes, this is what she just read.
Yeah, so that is the same as the previous policy. So unless it's in yellow, those were the
Correct.
changes.
Right.
Okay, well, I printed out, Mr. Frederickson, what you had sent over the weekend, so I don't know if there were any changes in between.
I'm gonna bring it up here. 249.
You should have received the old policy as a PDF. and
Correct.
Mr. Spring's document file, Word document files, that included the red line of what he changed. He made no changes to this paragraph.
Okay,
So, Mr. Funk, I think you can answer the question. We do have bullying programs, right?
We do?
Yes.
Yeah, so that remains consistent that time.
That language, yeah,
Okay.
there was no change to that whatsoever.
okay. And what program, I guess if that's not in there, that would just be a separate question, the programs that we use?
We use Olvius, we use different programs. We have restorative practices, used extensively at the secondary level.
Buddy's Best.
The positive behavioral intervention support that we have, PBIS.
But not like an actual program? Are you saying that is a program? It's implemented, so like that I could go in and I could see it? Or is it like an integration
I
somehow?
would say it's more integrated.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Comments? Mr. Chicken?
Just a clarification to what you were just saying. I mean, actually, it says the district may develop, means they may not either. But it just says if you develop them, that they will provide staff and students with the appropriate training. You know, so you're covered in that regard as well.
Well, I can just go to Ms. Khan. So Al mentioned PBIS, restorative practices at the elementary level, also a responsive classroom.
Mr.
Scroll a
Dodd?
little bit for the changes, because again, we didn't get this, okay.
Well, so that's
We're just striking from the current policy.
Correct.
We're not doing, okay,
correct.
fine. I'll look at
And
it.
I can explain more.
No, it's good.
Okay.
I'm good.
And if it would be helpful, I can email these out.
Much
between now and the
better.
board
That'll
member.
be better
But
for the
it's
next
keeping
one.
them, the three separate, but having uniform as far as the actions,
You had said that before.
With respect to investigation.
just to make sure.
Okay. No more questions?
Just gotta be sure.
Comments?
Just to clarify, I did read through it, but there's nothing, it's just the verbiage that we're changing about how the investigation.
Correct, there's nothing
There's
substantive.
nothing, yeah.
We're not changing anything with respect to the definitions of harassment, bullying, or
Yeah.
any type of programmatic changes that are occurring in the school with respect to bullying or harassment or anything like that.
15 days to 20 days.
It's
So, yeah,
purely,
I did
it's
see
purely
that,
just
yeah.
investigative
Yeah,
process.
so that's fine.
These will be first read, Mr. Tate.
First read in the March agenda, thank you. All right, moving on to 251, Mr. Devlin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Policy 251, the education of children and youth experiencing homelessness. We need to update this policy to include educational stability for those who are being fostered by other families. Some salient points in this proposed change would include language regarding transportation, point of contact with the district, best interest determination as to what would be the best educational placement for the child, either to provide stability of of the home district or a better program that's closer to this new foster care system. So this is just updating a policy. We just had a ECYOH, Education of Children and Youth Experiencing Homelessness, just maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it's been brought to my attention that there was some fostering language missing from our current policy, and I would like to have it updated.
So I would just like to, I apologize, jump in here and just say from a formatting standpoint, there is a lot in this document that was just crossed out, And the reason that I did that is Mr. Devlin's document that I emailed you, the Word document, was based more on the PSBA template than our existing policy. A lot of the verbiage was little words changed here and there, so that's why 90% of this is yellow, because it is a change in terms of the way that it's structured. But the content of it, as Mr. Devlin said, most of it is just additional paragraphs added to cover the situations that he just described. So it doesn't take anything out in terms of what we're currently providing.
Correct.
It actually adds a little bit of rope around the additional services to additional population.
Right.
Sorry.
Questions? Mr. Dillon, does this policy change mean that we're going to be in any way expanding our services to students experiencing homelessness?
We are providing now services for foster students in which they're entitled, which may be an expansion. Transportation may be one of them. So we will be increasing our transportation for students who may be fostered outside of the district. Either we split it with the home or resident district or vice versa. We do the best interest determination. Maybe we pay for an education somewhere else. It all depends. So possibly yes, but it's really to ensure educational stability for those students who don't have an otherwise stable background.
Which is mandated by state law.
Yes.
Other questions, comments? All right.
First read, Mr. Tate?
First read, please. Thank you, Mr. Frederickson. That brings us to advertising. Mr. Rapp. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. At the last Finance Committee meeting, we discussed the advertising of at sports venues owned by the district, and we don't really have a policy, and I was directed by the board, I believe, to put together a policy that gives the responsibility for setting up and handling advertising to the superintendent in his spare time. This policy that I put together basically lays out the different aspects of advertising and specifically gives direction to the superintendent as to what the what needs to be set up as far as advertising goes, and then it directs him to oversee the advertising, to approve the content, ensure that everything that is posted complies with our local state and federal regulations, criteria for the approval, which may include relevance to the educational mission. That way, we're strictly allowing, things that are given the opportunity to make sure that the advertising has some benefit to students and follows the educational mission, things that, not advertising for things that we don't want in our schools. And by that I mean adult things, by alcohol and that type of thing. How the advertisements will be shown to and how they'll be displayed, whether or not that would be in school newsletters, websites, physical spaces within or outside school buildings. I think the majority of it we're worried about is outside school buildings. What fee would we, establishment of a fee structure, duration of these agreements, and to also develop administrative regulations to implement this policy. So I think this is what the board directed me to do, and this is what I put together with a little help from ChatGPT, to be honest.
I like your honesty.
And it was, at the risk of, giving up, being replaced by a machine.
Wait, you're irreplaceable.
That's true.
I did have a little bit of help with this policy.
Mr. Spring?
Yeah, I think it's great. The only thing, for consistency purposes, I know on number 3, it says superintendent or his/her designee.
Yes.
We may want to keep that consistent for each.
Okay.
Where it says superintendent and his or her
I
designee.
put it in there specifically for that one because that would be the part of the policy where the principals would be most involved. But we can, designate, I guess in my mind, designate was kind of assumed, obviously I would help with the fee schedule, but we could change the whole policy for designate.
Scott?
I guess generally I think it looks okay. My question was number 5. When this was first brought to the last meeting, we were talking about it regarding a very specific situation. It was like an athletic field. So I guess my concern is, or maybe even asking Dr. Sanko, is this something that you want, is to open it up for advertising our schools, our buildings, inside or outside potentially, and or website, and or school newsletter? I know it says not limited to, and it's at the discretion. I guess I only know from a very small perspective of having dealt with some of this with like my experience with the PTO. Like, I feel like when you say this or you want this, is this really what you desire? And it just opens up so many like opportunities, good, bad, or indifferent. And I'm fully supportive of, communities and businesses, all of that. I just don't know if necessarily our schools should be a place of advertisements or websites or our newsletters.
My thought process on that one was kind of the opposite. In that these are questions that might come up at some point, and now they've been addressed, and that it is up to the administration, and the administration's answer, I think, would be no.
Okay, all right, that's a different take than how I was reading it. So if that's how it's meant to be read, I see it now, and I'm good with it.
So
I have no questions, I guess.
The question is a good one, and it's absolutely right. We need to be very careful. And I think our intent with this is to provide opportunities for our organizations that support our kids, and be really mindful, because and it has to be built into the AR where we can say no, because there will be a lot of competing interest if we were ever to advertise on our website, or if we were ever to advertise in our newsletters. So Tony said it much better than I did, but so in short, no.
Okay, thank you. That makes me guess.
My question was the same as Mr. Springs. If you scroll all the way up to the top, just so we don't miss it. John, boom, right there, right under purpose, where it says designated to the superintendent. Are we also going to add or his designee? Or Dr. Sanko, do you want that responsibility in and of yourself?
I like the designee in there, to be honest with you.
Yeah, just make sure that we add it to the purpose as well as all the numbers underneath.
Mr. Louder?
Thank you. So last meeting, there was a bunch of requests for information for that particular science and situation at South. And I would think we may have squashed all those requests, or did you?
I thought we.
Okay, good. So there was nothing done with that.
The board received a separate email from me
Yeah.
containing the list of vendors, the size of the signs. There was actually a photograph of the signs attached to that email.
I remember that, but other than that, there was nothing from the other stuff, so. There was more requests, but I think that.
It was my perception that the will of the board was
Not to go down that avenue.
for the administration to take this over, and that's what I'm trying to do.
All right, so I want to double check. Thank you, Mr. Tate. I think that's it.
Other questions, comments? Okay, first read, marked meeting, and credit. Pardon me? Mr. Clark, you reviewed all these policies before they came before us, right?
Either I did or Peter did. The one we didn't really take too much of a deep dive on was the last one, because it's our understanding this is sort of very early in the process, and wanting, we're gonna see what the board wants to do with this before we start.
And you'll take a, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, no, fine.
You'll take a look at them before the March meeting.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt.
I figured.
Yep.
Wonderful. I think that's everything on our agenda.
The public comment here.
Yeah, I know.
Ed
See,
Tate?
next?
Ed Tate?
Ed Tate?
No, thank you. I appreciate that. Public comment. Does anybody wish to comment?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I know, Joe, thank you.
All right, my turn.
No, going once, going twice. All right. Move to adjourn. I heard your motion to adjourn. Second? Good, thank you, adjourn.
Is there a comment sheet?
Yeah, are we on?